All right, I'll go ahead and get started. If I sound a little different in this podcast broadcast, it's because I am using one of my big and bad microphones. I have the Shure SM7B microphone, the microphone that is used by just about anybody who wants to be seen, like they have a video and you can see them. They're going to use the SM7B because it's black, it's big, it looks really cool. I also have the RE, is it the RE? RE20. It's this big green monster. Looks like it was hanging between the legs of the Incredible Hulk. It's the sweetest damn microphone I have ever used. Oh my God. I love that microphone. It's ugly as sin, which is why anybody who's going to be on camera, they go to the SM7B. I still think the RE20 sounds better. But I think all this is just, who cares? The other day I was talking into one of these things, and I had a Shure SM58, which I like, and it wasn't that big of a difference. I guess there's a little more proximity effect, get that more the Darth Vader feel to it, because the RE20 has like fluting or holes to the side or something, so that you can go crazy on it, and it just doesn't pick that up. This one has a different way of doing it. It extends out. It's just a way of making sure you don't get too close to the mic. I don't think it's magical at all. Maybe it is. Maybe there's some electronics that does that. Who gives a shit? I am going to be swearing in this podcast, and I'm not going to do it because I think that's necessary. I'm not going to do it because I'm running some kind of a porn podcast. It's because I want to scare away the people who are offended by nickel and dime profanity. I don't want you on my train. I don't want you following me. I don't want you telling your friends about me. I don't want you showing up to my shows. I don't want to be around you, and I don't want you to be around me. No, nothing personal. It's just that I want to be myself. I want to relax. I don't swear all the time. I'm not Popeye the Sailor Man. But I'll tell you what, if I feel like doing it, I don't want to be escorted into an alley. I don't want to be boycotted. If you don't like what I'm selling, then just don't buy it. Go someplace else. Slurp it up, man. Go find a funnier guy. There are only like 1,000 of them. I'm me. I may never be any more successful than I am right now. I like to think of this podcast as just a bunch of confessional shit that they're going to bring up at my trial. I do not think anybody's listening to this. So if nobody's listening to it, why am I being tyrannized? I'm pulling hair out of my mouth, wondering how I got hair in it. Oh, I'm doing odd things to this microphone. It's I'm sticking my mouth up against the foamy part. I don't know how, but some hair got on the foamy part, and then it got on my tongue, and that's kind of hard to explain. So here I am. I am literally, and this is why you can't see me, because it's not much to look at. Nobody would take any time. I could put this on YouTube, but it wouldn't even be YouTube. It would be no tube. Nobody would be watching because I'm not much to look at. I look in the mirror and I'm like, can I get a recount? No. I had a joke, and I never got very far with it, where I talked about the fact that I have 2 mirrors in my house. And I said one of them wants to sleep with me. And then I like put on the most disgustingly over the top Latina accent. It's like, oh, Bill. Oh, you're so sexy. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, you look just like the George Clooney. I'm waiting for your hate mail. And then I said that the other one looks like Wanda Sykes at the DMV. She's like, oh, you old as fuck, you fat as fuck. Why the hell you ain't dead yet? And that's true. Mirrors, they're supposed to, I mean, a mirror should be a mirror, right? But some of them do you nice, and some of them just give you the finger, and you got to live with that. You got to decide. It's weird. It's like you get to decide which mirror is telling the truth. And at this point in my life, I really don't give a shit. I don't care what mirrors have to say. What do mirrors know anyway? I'm 54 years old. 54. And I'll tell you what, I don't really give a goddamn what you think. I really don't. Now, if you get me fired from my job, I probably will. And I'll get up there and make that apology, everybody makes while, all their shit's in a box. They're heading out the door, escorted by security, and they're weeping, thinking that's going to do some good. I'd like to see somebody get fired and get fired up. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever been fired from a job? I have. Not many jobs. I mean, I'm not a complete incompetent. Okay? I can go years and years without anybody detecting just how shitty I am. But I got to say, in all honesty, I'm okay. I mean, I am enough of a conformist. I generally get there on time. I generally follow I'm not good at following instructions. But I smile and I nod and I shake hands. And I try because I know, I need that paycheck. So I've always been relatively conscientious, I mean, I don't want to take it to an extreme. But I'm not trying to fuck over the system. I'm not. I understand. It's like we have an agreement. We have an understanding, okay? You need something done, and I'm going to go do it, and you're going to pay me the least amount of money you can because you're a prick. And I'm going to at least try to do the job. And, I'm not perfect, and I'm not going to, if I feel like I'm getting screwed over, I might push back a little bit. But I'm not taking the money out of the till. I'm not, I might roll in a couple of minutes late every now and then. I might have moments where I probably should be doing something instead I'm just scratching my balls. That's just the way it is. That's you didn't hire any perfect people, you didn't get any perfect people. I try harder than the average guy. I try harder than most, but I'm 54. I'm not putting up with any more of this shit. I'm not afraid to be fired. I don't want to be fired, but I'm not afraid to be fired. That's an important distinction to make, because I think a lot of people go through life perpetually afraid they're going to get fired. And it's like the tyranny of that, that fear just weighs over them. And it's a weird thing. Like my old man, I love my dad. He was an amazing individual, warts and all. But I got to say, one time, I don't know how this happened, but I got to see him at work. And my dad had no formal education. He dropped out of school when he was a kid. He was a kid who had been sick as a dog as a child. I think bad lungs go in my family. I'll probably die of pneumonia. That's I think that's how it's going to go. My lungs are just going to look like a wading pool, and then I'll be fucked. But what happened is my dad lived up in Michigan, where it is, wow, they get the best of both worlds. It's cold as ice, and it's humid. You put the two of them together, it's like a giant death trap. I've never been to Michigan, so I have no idea what I'm talking about. But I've heard people talk, and that's generally what comes out of their mouth if they're from Michigan. That and mispronounced English. So my dad, when he was just a little pup, he got rheumatic fever, and he almost died. They didn't know what to do for him or to him. The doctors, I heard this story, that they told my granddad, you better get him down south to a warm, dry climate, or you better start shopping for coffins. Which is a hell of a thing to say. I don't care if you are a doctor. 8 years of medical school, that's what you say? You piece of shit. So anyway, what happens is my grandpa wasn't going to go shopping for coffins. So he loaded up the truck and he moved to Beverly Hills, that is. Yeah. So they did. They moved, got the whole family, and they moved south. And they went through the southern states, like Texas, and they went through New Mexico and Arizona. They're on their way to California. And then they stopped off in Tucson. Now, Tucson isn't even the best place in Arizona. But for whatever reason, I think the old man found a job, and you can't get more hot and dry than southern Arizona. So that's what he did. I could have grown up in the shadow of Hollywood. I could have already acclimated to that more expensive California world and found a way to make it. But instead, I grew up in a land of tarantulas and scorpions and cacti. Like 1,000 days a year of 100-degree cloudless skies. That is what I grew up in. So, why am I talking about this? My dad. I was talking about not getting fired, or getting fired, not being afraid to be fired. My dad had no education. Yeah. So, they treated him with kid gloves. My dad was like super smart. He missed school, and because he missed school, he just read. He didn't have TV. He didn't have VCRs. He wasn't streaming movies. He was sitting there with his thumb up his ass. He got all these books, and he read. I mean, he read through every kind of book he could, just to have something to do. In essence, he was homeschooled because he was out with his, with those kick-ass lungs of his. And so, the old man, who was a young man, he grew up wanting to do more stuff. He got back into school, and they put him back in the grade because he missed so much school. And then he was blazing through it because he was the most literate kid in his class. And so they jumped him a grade. And then I guess every time they give him a book, he'd say, I've already read that. And they impressed him so much, he started jumping more grades. And he would have been an amazing, he could have had an education, he could have taken the world by the tail. But this was the 50s, and it was a restless time, right? And we're talking about Elvis time, right? Something like that. Maybe not. Maybe it was the 40s. He was born in 39, so let's say he was 10 years old. That would have been 49. Yeah, that's pretty close to the 50s. So what ended up happening is my dad, he kind of absorbed this whole James Dean culture, like the Grease. It's like the whole Grease ethic, And so he tried to be a tough guy, and he was just a scrawny, nothing of a person, and he was trying to be that guy. So he would steal apples, and he'd commit petty crimes. He pulled screws out of the desk and say, "Teacher, you want a screw?" Just stuff like that. He's just a little bastard. And I guess he ran with some crowd, and they used to steal cars. They used to shoplift them or whatever. They called it joyriding, right? See somebody left their damn keys in their car, you crank it up and then drive it someplace else. And that was like a really independent generation too. It wasn't like today where we're always watching the kids, and we got to know what they're doing and where they are. They might choke on their tongue. There might be a pedophile jumping the fence. There's always that. We're just very, very worried about our kids. And that generation, I mean, they were battling the Great Depression, and they were battling Hitler and the Japanese imperialists, and fighting the Cold War, and they didn't have time to worry about pedophiles jumping fences or kids swallowing their tongues. So the kids ran around everywhere. They'd get on a bus and they go downtown and they watch, I guess, Saturday morning cartoons and serials. My dad told stories about how, I guess, different parts of downtown Tucson, they had these, he's talking about the Fox, and I don't know what the other one was. He'd go from theater to theater, and kids had a sense of independence. Like they're everywhere, they were doing whatever they were doing. And I could see the sort of big kid version of that was, you see somebody's got a car and they're dumb enough to leave the keys in, so you crank it up and you drive it across town, and then you leave it. You're not really trying to take it away from them. You're just being a shit. That's what you're doing. You're just being a little bastard. And so that was sort of the way they looked at it. They didn't want to ruin anybody's, they didn't want to ruin your record, and they're just weirdly protective, in that culture. And so what happened was, my dad got used to stealing cars, and he wasn't chopping them. He wasn't cutting them into pieces and, selling the parts and making as much money as he could off of a car. They were just moving the car from one side of town to the other side of town so they didn't have to take the bus. And, of course, they thought they were badass because they stole someone's car. I'm not justifying what they were doing. What I am saying, I guess, is that they were caught up in that whole thing. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, because my dad, when he was like 15, he and his buddies decided to joyride a car and take it across the country. They thought that would be the coolest thing anybody ever did. They would just go see the world. And they did. They saw Colorado. My dad saw Colorado for 2 years within the penitentiary up there. I don't know which one, but he ended up in prison over stealing somebody's car. And it's weird. I mean, he did 2 years, and he wasn't on probation after that. He wasn't supervised. You didn't have to go see a PO and all that kind of stuff like they do today. He got in trouble, and he went straight to prison. And when he gets drunk, you would tell us about how, they stood him up in court and said, "Do you want to be tried as children, or do you want to be tried as adults?" And he and his friends stupidly stood up and said, "We want to be tried as adults." So they did, and they went to prison. My grandfather drove day and night to get there and was a day late. And I can't imagine what my grandfather went through to know that his son was in prison. But my dad was a pain in the ass all the way up to that point. So I can't imagine he was all that surprised, because my dad was incorrigible. He had, for some reason, he had this really strong, defiant quality about him. You couldn't stop him. You couldn't correct him. And he ended up, getting in over his head. But my dad wasn't a criminal. He was just a punk and got himself in too deep, and now he had a criminal record. And in the 50s, to have a criminal record was, you were completely marginalized. It's still pretty bad if you have a felony on your record. There's jobs you'll never be able to do and all of that. But it's not, I don't think today is anything like what it was back in the 50s, where a mark against your name, a disgrace, that just kicked you out of polite society. So there was my dad living a good portion of his life. He was the smartest guy around, but he didn't feel like he could do much with it. He always felt a little sheepish, like he didn't belong among the better people, So he hung out with all the dummies. He was the smartest one in a whole room full of dummies. And he was in construction. And everything he did was high quality. Get into these arguments over how much water to put into, I guess, the cement mix. Because if you don't put enough water in, especially in hot, dry climate, you end up with a wall with cracks all over the place. And that's the old man that he was. He wasn't afraid to get fired. He didn't have any education behind him. And he had to just find whatever he could find. He didn't want to be some schmuck working as a cashier in a store getting paid minimum wage. He had higher hopes for himself. He got into construction and he kind of like rallied, And this guy worked his ass off. He just was a strong, stout. It was a guy. He just trying to make a living, trying to do something. So he got into construction and made good money. He did that. It gave him a sense of redemption. And he could make better money than some of the people with an education. The only problem is getting the next construction job. Pays well when it's on, but you get to that point where it's not on anymore. Now you go find the next construction job. So we moved around a little bit. And the old man, boy, the thing is that he developed a sense of self. And he knew, particularly with that crew, that you gotta stand up. You gotta stand on your own. Because if you don't, people will roll over the top of you. Gotta have some attitude. I think he tried to teach me that. I don't think he did a very good job. I wasn't a very good learner in that department. I think I didn't really understand what he was getting at till I saw that movie. What is that? El Torino? Is that the name of the movie? That Clint Eastwood movie? Where he takes that Korean kid and he's soft-spoken and he's polite, but he's living in this shitty neighborhood. And it's like, well, what's he going to do? So he takes him in and he shows him. And of course, you can always criticize that as like some old, crusty old white guy teaching the Korean kid how to be another white guy. But I don't know. I think I'd like to think it's a little broader than that. That is, it's blue-collar culture, which wasn't limited to white people, because there were Latinos like that. There were black guys like that. There were anybody who was swinging a belt, a hammer, working a construction job. There's a certain way in which you walk down the street. There's a certain way in which you present yourself. You were supposed to be a provider, and you were also supposed to be a protector. And you were supposed to lay down the law so your kids didn't end up in the street. And those three things right there, people can say whatever they want. It's a different world today. There are obviously different things people are doing to make a living and to get ahead. But that was what was available then, and thems were the rules in the day. You got to be a provider, you got to be a protector, and you got to be an enforcer so your kids don't end up in bad places. And I think my dad was pretty hard on me at times. Other ways he was probably not hard enough. And that was him second guessing or feeling guilty. And I think about that term weak, like weakness. There's like a macho culture where you can't afford to be weak, right? And I grew up and watched the folly of macho male culture. I hear people talk about it, toxic masculinity, which is no doubt some term invented by a feminist. This is some of these terms where they make you out to be a hateful person. It's just them twisting language. Every group does it. Every group tries to make something like their point of view is the only reasonable, rational point of view. And it's all about power, because you control the language and you control power. And you make the world in your image. And I've never seen a group of people who were 100%, who were not evil and dark and sinister in some aspect of their life. I don't mean people are bad. And people are shit, but they're not bad. And people, we all want to live. We all want to do what we do. But people have a tendency to be territorial and to be domineering with a certain culture, certain whatever. So it's now very easy to take pot shots, at the macho thing. And like, well, look at this dumbass. He's macho. Because they're not smart, see. They're not smart. I think it's really funny. You get these bunch of millennials, and they're like, they eschew toxic male culture, but then they run around with these mustaches and beards from like the fucking 19th century. Like, what the hell's going on, guys? What the hell? You guys look like you just crawled off a bar of soap, or like you just came off the wrapper of of some kind of like tonic. You should be selling this shit from a covered wagon in some little dusty town or something. I really don't get it. But it's like everybody's a savage in their own way. But my dad grew up with this culture that said that's how you're supposed to treat women, right? And children and all this. So you like my grandfather taught, you pick on someone your own size, which today we talk about don't punch down, and my grandfather would have agreed with that, and my dad grew up with this culture, this you got to take care of, because that's the way it was, moms were at home, so they were dependent upon whatever paycheck you came back with, and so a real man took care of his woman, took care of his wife, so he'd be a good provider. And a real man would also protect his family. And then a real man would also enforce to make sure that his family didn't end up, in the streets doing bad things. And we can pot shot that, but that's not the worst ethic anybody ever had. Okay? My dad lived that life. He was like that, and I resented him at times because I thought he was kind of a hard ass, but maybe was he a prick, or was he being an asshole, or was I being a pussy? And I, to this day, and maybe to the day I die, I'm still going to be debating that. Was the old man an asshole, or was I just being a pussy? And I know people get mad. They're like, you shouldn't say pussy. Why? Because, it's disrespectful and it's misogynistic. And it's not how it was used. And maybe it came out of this idea of men being proud of being men and having sort of these very defined roles, whatever. But when a man called another man a pussy, what he was saying is, you're weak. You're weak. And I've often thought, I grew up with this idea that, I wanted to be more more nuanced, more polished than that. So, I went to college and I read books and I studied languages and, and even when I'm dealing with people, I try to make sure that the voltage doesn't exceed the need of the moment. If I got somebody they're screwing up and they need to be told, I speak up, because if you don't, people roll right over the top of you. But at the same time, there's no need to create a secondary issue by being an asshole. Get your point across, let them know you want what you want, and then back it off a little bit. That's just managing the situation. And my dad had more of that blue collar thing where you bark until you break glass. My dad would go into these rants that they were acidic. They take the paint off your car. And the car would burst into flames. I burst into tears. And so I resented my dad. Especially since my parents were divorced. My dad always talked about my mom. And he just ripped into her. So I thought he was an asshole. And I, of all the kids in the family, I'm the one who looks the most like my mom. She has like a rounded nose. I have a rounded nose. She had high cheeks. I have high cheeks. And we have the same complexion, things like that. So it didn't take me long to figure out that I looked a little bit like someone he didn't like, or broke his heart, because they did not split on the best of terms. So the thing is that he bitched about my mom so much that when he'd come down on me, I'd think, well, what a fucking asshole. No wonder she left his ass. Who could live with this guy? And that was an issue. But reality is, we're all products of the world we come out of. And we can't be judged outside that culture. And I'm going to say something, and man, nobody's listening to this thing anyway, but I imagine after you hear this, somebody's going to go, I'm out of here. But we got kids today that they won't pledge allegiance to the flag. That does piss me off. I'm not going to. I think the pledge is stupid. Okay, so I got that one part of it. I think any kind of ritual where everybody's got to come together and we all got to say the same brain dead bullshit over. It's like I was not raised Catholic. I can't imagine some set prayer that we all get together and do the zombie talk. Sorry for my Catholic friends, but that and then I know, I think Jews have set prayers, so they're in Hebrew, which is kind of cool, but there's a set prayer. I know Muslims have some set prayers. I got high enough in the Mormon Church, which is another story for another day. But in that, I finally went to the temple, and in the temple, they have these set prayers. So I get it, and so you have this secular religion of America where, we're gonna say our little thing together, it's like the whole world doing the Boy Scout oath at the same time. It's a stupid ritual. I get that, but at the same time, as an older guy, I'm looking down. I taught school for 20 years, and I look out, and everybody was saying the Pledge of Allegiance right up to the last couple of years, and Colin Kaepernick takes a knee. And I understand why he did it. I understand the point, because people have become too complacent about racial injustice, and it's become too easy for the cops to kill black people. And then when you go to hold the cop accountable, he goes in front of a grand jury, and the grand jury pussies out, and you end up with this weird thing. And here's a guy, he's $1 million a year athlete, and at the same time, he's going through guilt. I mean, we talk about white guilt. And this guy, I mean, he's got like, I don't want to make a factual statement about his parentage or where that goes, but obviously something bothered him. You know, he's African American, but he's also, he's raised in a different. He wasn't raised in the ghetto. He wasn't raised in the heart of whatever stereotypical bullshit's going through your mind. That wasn't the world that he was raised in, right? So I think, he's trying to find his own identity. And I see that. I've seen that in a lot of different people where you're like, who am I? What am I? How do I, So he comes up with this thing and he doesn't say the pledge, and then he takes a knee, and then people get all pissed off about it and they don't understand the context. But it's all worked its way down to now the kids aren't saying the pledge, which it's kind of a weird thing because it's a stupid ritual to begin with. But when you go to do a recitation of the pledge and nobody says the pledge, like I got like maybe 2-3 kids in the whole class who say the pledge, it's I don't know, it's kind of disgraceful. And we're trying to make a context in which we're saying, well, if you're not see now, if they didn't say the pledge because they were upset about treatment of African American suspects, or just unarmed motorists getting blown to shit by crazy trigger finger cops that seem to get fired all too slowly. I get that, but I don't like in my class. Nobody's taking a knee. They're just sitting around playing on their phones. I don't think they're doing it out of principle, and that for some reason that pisses me off. Maybe it shouldn't. Maybe I need to be more woke, but I'm not going to change my perceptions. I'm going to allow for other ideas and be open. And where I'm wrong, I'm okay. All right. I was raised with some dumb ideas, and now I'm going to open up. But that doesn't mean that new ideas are free from the risk of being stupid too. And I hang around with a lot of comics that are like 20-nothings, and they will get on Facebook or Twitter or wherever, and they'll share with the world their vast wisdom. And I see a lot of intolerance. I don't see someone saying, hey guys, what about this? I see, the angry young man. This is like the Billy Joel song, the angry young man with his fist in the air and his head in the sand. That's a good lyric. So, I don't know. I've had a few Facebook fights with people. They usually write me off, and I think nobody's following me on Facebook either. This podcast is just an extension of my my soliloquy into the dark. But that's okay. I'm doing the podcast. I don't care if nobody listens to it. I just like doing the podcast. I do like the sound of my own voice, especially through the Shure SM7B microphone. Yeah, and the RE20. Oh my God, that's a great microphone. All right. I'm going to do this shit. And I'm going to keep saying things like shit and fuck and piss, cocksucker, motherfucker, till I run off all of you prudes who are just going to disown me the first time I stumble. I don't need you on my train, man. Get off my damn bus. Move it. Go someplace. Go follow somebody who can live whatever the hell that is you call life. I have more to say. I talk about my dad and his way of looking at things. I was talking about getting fired because my dad, and this is about being afraid of being fired. My dad would, he worked his way up in construction, and he had jobs that he didn't like, had to deal with people he didn't like. And my dad, I guess, is because you lose this job, you go get that job. there's a certain amount of freedom in that, as long as you got a couple of bucks set aside. I was watching some movie, and this guy was talking about fuck you money. I think they had John Goodman in the movie, and he was talking about fuck you money. And it was like, everybody needs to have a certain amount of fuck you money, so that when somebody rolls over the top of them, somebody treats them badly, somebody says something, puts them down, that they can own their own dignity and say, fuck you, and then walk. You can't do that if you're busted ass broke. You can't do that if you don't have two nickels to put together. You can't do that if you're over leveraged. You got credit cards you can't pay off. You got cable bills. You got this and that. A mortgage, car payment. Harder to do. But it's a good idea to have fuck you money. My dad never really had what I would call fuck you money. But that didn't stop him from saying fuck you. He would just say it. If he'd work his ass off for somebody. He was loyal, like a dog. Loyal. But he wasn't like he wasn't like Smithers on The Simpsons, you know. He wasn't going to suck Mr. Burns' cock and just, he wasn't going to do that. Because he didn't have to. My dad used to get his ass kicked by my grandfather. My grandfather, whom I'm named after, fighting Billy Lee, that guy was a prize fighter. Now, mind you, he was an Irish prize fighter. Make your judgments if you must. And he was a featherweight. So I don't know that he ever killed anybody in the ring. But he did beat my dad's ass on a regular basis. And he was not a violent guy, which is an interesting thing. He never pushed my grandma around. He was a perfect gentleman, even though he had no formal education. He fought in the Great Depression, and then he went to work in a lumber yard. Those are not careers that kids sit around and pine for, I don't think. But he was a sweet guy, nice guy, but he was also authoritative, and my dad was a little bastard. So my grandfather taught him how to fight and broke his nose. My grandfather expected him to be upstanding. He taught him things like yes sir, no ma'am, please and thank you don't cost you a dime. There were a lot of really good values that my dad got from his parents, and then just ignored him at times because he was a little punk. And but my dad got his ass kicked enough that I don't think anybody in life could ever be as imposing to him as his dad. It's like, I think that he'd grown up with the toughest guy. And my grandfather, if I had to like take a Hollywood star, and the young people aren't going to get this, but Jason Robards. Anybody remember that? Jason Robards. Kind of like that. Kind of like Jason Robards in the movie All the President's Men. That's what my grandfather was like. At least that's what I think. I only saw him towards the end. I came along much later, so I didn't get to see him in his fighting days. But that's the sense I got, that he was a good man, solid man. But he was working class. My dad was never afraid to tell somebody "fuck you." He wasn't afraid to get fired. There's a great story where he's working a construction job, and it was like a short-term thing, and the job was in December, and the very last day, was the day after Christmas, and the contractor needed him working the day after Christmas, and he just told everybody straight up, I'm not going to pay you. I'm not going to pay you till the day after Christmas. And and the reasoning was solid. He knew, particularly this class of people, that if you paid them early, half of them wouldn't show up for work. You know? And he wouldn't see him again. The job wouldn't get done. He wouldn't get paid himself. So he told him straight up that Christmas was on a Thursday, payday was on Friday. And that was the last day of that job. And so he told everybody, I'm not paying you till Friday. And, you know, that went over like a lead balloon. And he says, look, I'll lend you the money, but I'm not going to give you the paycheck. I'm not going to give you a whole paycheck, you know. And my dad said, what if I quit? And the guy says, well, you know the rules. If you quit, you still have to wait till Friday to pick up your check. So my dad said, well, what if you fire me? And the guy said, why would I fire you? You're the hardest working guy I got. And my dad said, well, if I kicked your ass, would you fire me? I'm like, if I beat your ass so hard you pissed blood for a week, would you fire me then? And the guy says, you're fired. And my dad took that shortened paycheck, and he went down and he bought Christmas presents. And he had told us ahead of this, you know, hey kids, we're not gonna be able to do Christmas till the day after Christmas. And he's like, listen, you know, but it's okay because the stores have all those after Christmas sales, so we'll be able to buy more presents. I mean, he made a good pitch. I mean, I was on board. More presents. I can wait a day. But I think he just felt guilty about it. So he got himself fired. And when I heard that, it made me laugh. Because that was my dad. My dad was not afraid to get himself fired. And I think sometimes you got to walk. And if you don't have the independence of spirit to get fired, if you've never been fired from a job, you probably are screwed up. I think it's like getting into a fight. We got a whole generation of kids that have never gotten into an actual fight. They never punched, got into it with somebody. And it kind of clears your head. It really clears your thinking. It is something when you get into a fight. The first time I ever got in a fight, oh my God. I don't know if it was the first time. I got into quite a few fights at school. Just because I invited abuse, because I was a scrawny little guy, I was afraid of my own shadow. I had issues because of my parents' divorce, and I wasn't taken too well to my hardcore dad bossing me around and things like that. I was a pussy. And thing is that people come up on me, and I guess I took a certain amount of abuse, and then I didn't. And I mean, I remember in junior high, right, 7th grade, and there's some kid, a friend of mine. We had a thing. Now I'm gonna bring something up. It's not meant to be a racist thing, but I grew up in racism, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about some of that. Some of the comments that are obviously not what I would call, you know, nice comments. But we had a thing. It's called a Mexican standoff, and what they meant by it was two guys getting up in each other's faces and basically posing, just posturing. Today you could call it just a WWF SmackDown because these two guys, and they're just playing it up, high theater. But this is Southwest, and there's a lot of racial animosity between the white kids and the Hispanics, Latinos, brown kids, however you want to call it. So you got that sort of goes back and forth. Most of my friends, by the way, were of Mexican descent, and most of my enemies too. I mean, that was the world that I lived in. There were white kids, and then there were brown kids, and we just mixed it up. And I don't think we were segregated in the sense that like only the white kids played with the white kids and the brown kids played with the brown. It's like we were mixed together, and it was just a part of the world. And of course there were prejudices and groups feeling, you know, more connected with people who were just like them. But there was so much in Tucson. I don't know about Phoenix. I think Phoenix was whitey white town. I think is white people took over and dominated that shit. Colonizers, But in Tucson, it was more of a rough and tumble thing. And part of my growing up was in a little town of Ajo, and most of my friends were Mexican descent. So you just kind of it was part of life, and then there were little, I don't remember anybody being called a beaner. I don't think, I don't like that term, and I don't know why. I don't think it's the worst thing you say about a guy is that he likes to eat beans, but I don't like anti-Mexican slurs, But we did have that term, Mexican standoff. And what happened is my friend, he had something like a frisbee or a little football or something. We're sitting in an art class. And this school was a rough school. This is the rough side of town. And they used to have gates that would come down and lock this big chunks of the school up until just before class. Just right before the bell rang. Then we could go into the school. They didn't trust us. And probably for good measure, because we were rough little snots. I mean, when I was a kid, we used to take bubblegum wrappers and then make these little goalposts that look like goalposts out of football, and then you stick them in the outlets and pop the fuse or pop the outlet, and it's just really reckless stupidity. But that's just par for the course. And I went to school. I went to one school that was so hardcore that, I left. We were playing basketball, and I took my coat off, and I forgot to pick it up. It was places I lived, either in Arizona or Florida. It'd be chilly in the morning, and then, by lunch it was too hot to wear a sweater or a jacket. And I remember playing basketball. I took my jacket off, and then forgot it, and then I came back the next day, and it had been cut, sheared, just ribbons. It didn't look like a jacket anymore. It just looked like shredded cloth. And that's just the world that I grew up in, just a bunch of Tasmanian devils of whatever racial background you want to throw into that. But it was just poor kids, tough world, tough neighborhood, and that kind of stuff. So I'm sitting in art class, and you would think that would be a whole bunch of artsy people, It'd be very effete, very, you'd be in there with Trevor and, Blake and Dylan and, somebody with a French-sounding last name or something like that. We're sitting here in art, but it wasn't. And I don't know if they just tossed us into art class, but I'm in there, and there was a lot of scumbaggery in my art class. And my friend had this football or frisbee, something like that, and they were tossing around. And one of the weird things they did in school is that we didn't have enough money to build more schools, and we just kept having more kids in the neighborhood. So what they did is they created year-round schools. We go on 9 weeks, and we'd be off 3. And that meant that 25% of the school, at any given time, 25% of the school was on vacation, a 3-week vacation. And the other 9 weeks, we were out there kicking it. And to do that, they broke the school down into quadrants. And then they were color codes. So we had reds, blues, oranges, and greens. And this was your group that you hung with. You were in one of these 4 groups. And I remember I was at one school, and I was a blue. And we couldn't stand the reds. And what these dumb fucks had done, dumb fucks with a degree, had actually turned us into street gangs based on our color group. So when I was at one school, I think it was called Santa Clara. I think it was Santa Clara, and I was a blue. And I remember we got into a kickball game, and it almost went to blows. In the kickball game, I got in trouble because I flipped somebody off, and when we had a little powwow, They talked about somebody giving the other guys a bird, and it was me. But it was like we were the Blues, and we hated the Reds. And then I changed. We I changed because my dad was able to afford better digs in a better trailer park. Yeah. So I ended up going to Elvira. That was a different one. And at Elvira, I was not in the Blues now. I was in the Reds. And it was really crazy because I hated Reds. I had, talking about, racial, they were making us racist. They were making us something. We were colorists. And I had been a Blue, and Red sucked, and now I was a Red, and Blues sucked. So I get into this junior high, we're all packed in, and we're all different colors. And not only are we having an issue with each other because of which school we came to, because we came from different elementaries into a common junior high. It wasn't like you went to elementary and then you went to junior high. That junior high serviced a number of different schools. So there were already distinctions based on the fact that we came from different schools. But we also had the color codes. So we also, if the different schools did produce conflict, and the fact that we were from different colors produced it. And I'm in this class. We're in this art class, which is crazy because color is part of art. And I'm sitting there with my fellow Reds from Elvira, and then these guys are Blues. I don't remember if they were from Elvira or if they were from like Santa Clara or one of these other ones. But somebody took my buddies, and I don't even remember. It was a football or a Frisbee, something. I think it was a Frisbee. He took it, and they wouldn't give it back. And they were really taunting him with it. And so my friend stands up, and he's being very adamant, give me back my Frisbee. And he's looking tough. So this other kid pops up and confronts him. And now we got, it's turning into a West Side Story over a Frisbee in an art class. And my friend is like, I could see a tear coming down his cheek because he was so humiliated and he was so angry. And for the life of me, I have no idea where the hell the teacher was during this entire exchange. But I jumped up in a sense of valor. I jumped up and I said, you want to fight somebody? How about you want to fight me? Now, let's be honest. I'm a lover, not a fighter. I just said that so that my friend, I could give a little solidarity for my friend. Well, as soon as I said that, then another guy gets up. Hey, Kilpatrick, you want to start something? We're going to do this. Next thing you know, more of those guys step up. And then my friends are stepping up. And that's when I went mad dog on them. I'm like, you want to start something? You want to start something? And I'm like, I'm like a professional wrestler, before there was professional wrestling. And they're like pulling on me. This is what we call the Mexican standoff. Two guys posturing and posing and, acting like they were really going to throw down. And it was the job of my friends to pull on me. Don't do it, man. He's not worth it. Don't do it. Don't do it. So they pulled us apart. We sat down. My friend got his Frisbee. But at the end of the class, this one fucking psycho that I was talking to, he didn't understand the game. He didn't understand that it was all just posturing. It was all just, stupid kids just gaming, that's the game. He took it so seriously. At the end, he starts following me out. I'm trying to walk to my next class, and he starts throwing punches at me. Now, they're not real punches. What he wants to do is see me flinch, right? So he starts popping at me, and every time he does, I'm a soft and gentle kind of guy, notwithstanding my little, grandstanding back there. And so when he does this little punch thing, I start blinking, and he starts laughing, and it's that creepy laugh. This guy probably went on to be a rapist or something. He just had that creepy, oh, you don't really want to fight. And so he just keeps doing this. Well, I'm like the rabbit. If you corner the rabbit, you're going to get some teeth, all right? He throws this thing. I clench. And then I snapped. And the moment I snapped, I hit him right in the face. And that really surprised him. And then everybody's like, oh, Kilpatrick's going to fight. And then the guy came back, and I hit him again because my grandfather was a prize fighter. What did we do? When we went to Grandma and Grandpa's house, we hit. My grandfather had a was it like a duffel bag? He had a punching bag, but it was full of sawdust. And what do? We punched the shit out of that thing. Man, our knuckles hardened up, and we were used to punching. So when this guy came at me, I just started tearing his ass up. I gave him a black eye. I came close to breaking his nose. And I got suspended over it and all that. But I just remember that when I got into that moment, I wasn't afraid anymore. You know? I'm swinging. And in that moment of swinging, I'm taking care of business. And I got as cold as a shark. You know what I mean? Just the passion is gone. Now it's just a matter of, all right, where's his head? Where's his head? Now. Bam! You know? And I kicked his ass. There's like no ifs, ands, or buts. I kicked that kid's ass. And I wasn't a fighter. But once you get into the fight, you lose your fear, and it feels good. It feels good. It doesn't feel good to get hit, but it actually feels kind of good to let out some of that. And I'm not a rager. I'm not trying to be a rager. I'm just saying our generation, fighting was normal. And because it was normal, we weren't afraid to do it, and we'd had experience with it. And we kind of had that. We had that as part of our experience. I don't know that kids today have that. And I think a lot of people kind of store up the negative. And I'm not saying that they should go out and beat the shit out of each other, but we did, and we lived to tell the tale. So what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? I'll tell you what it has to say. Here's the thing. You go through life with these fears, and you got to confront them. Because when you don't confront them, you live with them, and they hang, and it's worse. It's like when you have to throw up, right? I think I'm going to talk to you about the Viking vomit. I might as well. I invented this thing called the Viking vomit. I'm very proud of that fact. Hope you're not eating. If you are, well, I didn't tell you to tune in. You did, okay? But here's the thing, all right? Nobody likes to vomit. Nobody likes to throw up, right? And we're all scared of it. And when you know it's coming, what do? You do everything to avoid having to have that happen. You might burp a little bit. You might drink some water. You go take a little nap, hoping that it'll settle your stomach. You may get on the toilet and start going away, hoping that you empty your bowels, and you think, well, that just maybe stuff will get sucked into the tubes, and maybe you won't want to come back up. Reality, of course, is that if your stomach's doing the countdown, T minus 10, 9, 8, it ain't going down the tubes. It's going up the tubes. You know it. I know it. If you take a little nap, that means you're going to puke. That means you're going to have to puke. You're going to wake up from either going to puke all over yourself in your sleep, or you're going to wake up from your little nap and go, oh, shit. And you're going to run to the toilet, and you're going to puke all the way to the toilet. And that's not going to be fun. If you're going to vomit, you're going to vomit. And sometimes in life, that's what's going to happen. And you don't have a choice. This shit is going to happen. So here's what I discovered, that the worst thing about vomiting is this pure lack of control. All right? And that is because, it's the autonomic system, right? You're not in control anymore. So what's going to happen is, whether you want it to or not, this thing takes over. It's not a manual anymore. This is automatic, okay? You're the passenger. You're not the driver. And so what happened is people throw up and they go, well, that sucked. Oh my God, I'm glad that's over. And then they take 2 steps and then they got to throw up again. And they have no control. They want to stop the throwing up and they can't because they're not in control. And then they throw up and they go, oh my God, that was horrible. And while they're doing that, they have to throw up a 3rd time. And that's the reality of it. Boom, boom, boom. All right. So, if that's what's going to happen, you got to understand this is the way it works. You're on a conveyor belt. This is like machine guided. You're not in control. And I noticed that it happens in 3s. In a really bad fit, it can be 4s and 5s, but it's definitely going to be at least 3. Never seen anything less than 3. So, my biggest concern whenever I'm throwing up is not that I'm throwing up. It feels squishy because your stomach's in a knot, and oh my God, and you're trying to stop it, and you're getting a Charlie horse in your stomach trying to stop what you cannot stop. But even more than that is that you feel like you're gonna choke to death like Keith Moon or something, right? So this is what I figured out to do. Call it the Viking vomit. I know I'm gonna throw up. I don't wait. I don't sit there and wait for my body. My body's doing this autonomic system countdown. This we're gonna send a rocket to Mars kind of thing, and it takes a long time. And it just churns and churns and churns. It's like, twist of the knife. I'm not going through that. If I know I'm going to throw up, I go over, I pop the lid, I'm looking down, I'm like, fuck this shit. And I'll squish my stomach real hard, and I'll force myself to I don't have to stick my finger down my throat. I would just create a pressure in my diaphragm. And blah! And out it comes, right? And while it's doing, I don't want any of this shit going into my lungs because we all know my family's got the weak lungs. So what I do is I scream. I do a primal scream. And this is something I learned on I know I'm going all over the place. This is something I learned on a roller coaster ride. If you try to hold it in, it's fucking frightening. On the other hand, if you scream like a little girl, it's distracting. You're just caught up in the whole moment. And the roller coaster and the vomiting are the same thing. You're not in control. It's very scary and all that because you're not in control. But if you get on the roller coaster and you throw your hands in the air and you scream, ah! It actually feels good. You let all that shit out. Same thing with vomiting. If you're going to vomit and you just start puking, you're like, I do the, ah! And I just go through. I can only imagine if anybody's listening to this, well, how fun that must be. You scream, just this primal scream. I call it the Viking vomit. You scream, Valhalla, whatever. And out, you just shoot lasers of lava coming right out of your mouth, and it hits the toilet. Now, as soon as it goes out, that's the time when you take a deep breath, because that wasn't the only one. You know what's happening again, and then you do it again. Wah! And you yak it, right? Ralph it right into the toilet. Then you take another deep breath, and you get down, and here comes round 3. Ah! And it goes through third one. Now, some occasions it's at 4, 5, but at least 3. But now I have something to do. And I have a feeling of control, because there was something I can control. I leaned into it. I knew how I was going to present it. I knew what I was going to do with it. And I just yak it right into the toilet. And it's a thing of beauty. Sure, it's disgusting. But you know what? Roll up your sleeves, man. Life is dirty. Shit happens. You can either be a puss about it, or you can get on there and just do something with it. And that's what I do. I just puke it all out, right? And ironically, when I'm done, I flush the toilet, I brush my teeth, I gargle, and then I go to McDonald's, because now I'm hungry. And you're like, how could you eat after you just threw up? Well, I'm hungry. My stomach is completely empty. that's when you eat, I'm completely famished. And it works every time. And the thing is, if my stomach is upset, that's a problem. But a lot of the times, it's what you ate, and your body's just not going to keep that. It's like, this has got to go. So I go to McDonald's, I roll the dice again. But I've never had to throw up again after I threw up the first time, because not, unless I had a really weak stomach. My stomach's very unstable. I understand that, dry heaves and all that. But this sense that you have control over even the most horrific crap is actually useful. And it gives you a sense of liberation, of personal freedom. So I'm definitely in favor of that. And the same thing goes with getting fired. You got to learn to take some control of your own life. And that may mean quitting a job you don't like, or it may be getting fired. My first job as a lawyer, it didn't work out. I did not get along with one of the partners, and we had some real issues with each other. And and there were other things going on in the law firm, and so push came to shove. There came a moment where I had to go, and I quit. They say they fired me. We're both right, because nobody stopped me from quitting, and I didn't fight for my job. So I quit. They fired me. It doesn't really matter. We went our separate ways, and I was happier. I'm sure they were happier too. I started up my own firm, did my own thing, and I felt 100% better, because I was not going to work having to deal with a partner who didn't like me, didn't respect me, wanted somebody else in the job, and it was making my life difficult. I mean, I did things, I don't want to go there, but not everybody's going to like you, and you just have to deal with that. So, I did that when I practiced law. When I got out of law and I started teaching, my first job, it was unstable that year, and so they there was a fight between the union and the district, and then they lowered the number of units they allocated for every school. So first year teachers were all set adrift. But my first year, I only worked at that high school that first year, and then the next year they already had a job waiting for me before I even looked for a job, and I stayed at that school for 6 years. But I didn't want to be that person who only worked at one place. So then I left that place, and I started looking for something as good as it, and it wasn't. I went to one place, I wasn't too happy with that, so I transferred to the next place, stayed there for the rest of the year, and then I picked up another place that I liked, like the other place, and I did that for 6 years. And then I went to a high school, and I didn't like that, so I did 1 year of that, and then I looked at a different high school, and that one I've stayed at. And that's probably, that I never stopped. I did that all the way to the end of my teaching career. And the reason is that I wanted to stay at a place, if I got no reason to move, then why move? On the other hand, I'd seen a lot of teachers who, once they had an assignment at one school, they would never leave that school. They would just stay at that school as long as humanly possible. And some teachers had never left that school. And I think there is something to be said from time to time, getting up, get your shit, and move. Go to a different place, start in a different environment, have different colleagues, different people that you deal with in the administration. You got to do that. You got to have the freedom to move around a little bit, because if you don't, then you're afraid of being fired. you're boxed in, and somebody's got their idea of who you are, and you're under their thumb. Most schools that I've been at, I outlived. I outlived all the principals, and one school I think I went through 6 or 7 principals by the time I left. But it's like, that's okay. I mean, you do what you do, and you give your all to your job, but it's not your all. I mean, nobody's perfect. The thing is, that is the world we live in. I know this is a ramble, and that's okay. Because there's another thing I want to say. This thing's gone long. Yes, it has. I don't really give a shit. The point, I'm working towards a point, okay? I was going to talk about dog shit, believe it or not. How the world is full of dog shit. When I went out, because I do this podcast in my car. I mean, I'll do the podcast wherever I want. I got good equipment. I can filter out the bad stuff, the outside, noise and stuff. Make a nice, clean recording. But I had my stuff in my car, so I go out there. I went out there in my socks, and while I was standing there, out there in my socks, I started. That protective part of me kicked in. It's like there's dog shit everywhere. I've seen dog shit. The grass is a minefield of dog shit. For my dog, from other dogs. So it's like, hey, be careful. There's dog shit everywhere. You know the bumper sticker that says, look twice, save a life. Motorcycles are everywhere. I was doing the other bumper sticker. Look twice, save a life. There's dog shit everywhere. And I thought that is a great theme and a topic and a theme for what I'm going to talk about today. Is that the world abounds in dog shit. And you got to get used to that. And for some reason, people, particularly perfectionistic people, because nobody wants to be just, I don't know. There's some people out there that are absolutely disgusting. They go to the bathroom, they don't wash their hands. Their personal hygiene is a national tragedy. They're just some messed up people out there. I don't know how they made it this far, right? I don't know how they got here. They had ancestors that had sex and copulated and produced children and offspring, and this is what it all comes down to. All the thousands of generations, and then this thing, this is what it produced. Just amazing. But then there are people that are too finicky and they're too fastidious, and I think we sometimes work ourselves up. Like when I graduated from law school, it was going to be the coolest experience. I had kind of like a bridezilla mentality towards my graduation from law school. And that was because I came from a family where my parents were high school dropouts. And because of their example and because of the experiences that, the results of that life decision to drop out of school and never go back, my parents gave birth. Well, they had 4 kids. One of them didn't make it. But 3 of those kids, and 2 of them, like my sister was a dropout. My brother dropped out of school. Now, I'm not trying to knock them because my sister went back and eventually got her bachelor's, then she got her master's, and she was working on her doctoral dissertation when she died of cancer. So I'm not trying to say anything to badmouth my sister's reputation. When I say she was a dropout, I don't mean she was a dropout forever. And I don't think that's a bad thing for a human being. Some of the greatest successes in life were people who were dropouts. Apple computer was started by dropouts. And so was Microsoft, And Facebook, I don't think that guy, Zuckerberg, I don't think he finished. Did he? So, it's not the end of the world if you're a dropout. But, I mean, just if you dropped out. I don't know. I don't know if I want to brand people a dropout, but you know what I'm saying. So here's the thing. My sister dropped out, and later on my brother dropped out. I'm the only one in my family who like graduated from high school. And I wasn't aware that my sister took like a guitar class at community college or something like that. But at the time I went into college, I was the only one that I knew of in my family who had gone on to college. And my dad had built up this whole thing. Oh, get your 4-year degree. You'll be set for life. Yeah, right. But I got my 4-year degree. Then I went on to law school, and I did 4 years of college. I got 2 degrees, one in history, one in philosophy, and then I went on to law school, and I got my 3-year law degree in 2.5 years. And so I was like kicking some ass, man. And I really had this idea, like this is going to be so awesome, because nobody in my family had graduated from high school. All right, I'm the first one to graduate from college. I'm the first one to get into graduate school, and I'll be the first one to graduate with a doctorate. You could hear the angels singing as I thought about that every single time. And then what happened was I graduated in the middle of the year. In the coldest part of the year, December, well, not the coldest, but for people coming from the South, from Arizona and Florida and stuff like that, this is, they did not want to be up in Utah in December. But that's when I graduated. And there was no graduation to go to. So I actually had my diploma handed to me out of a filing cabinet. So I had this built in my mind. There's going to be this big, wondrous thing. I graduate from law school. Look at this stately thing. It was going to look like the beginning of Dead Poets Society, right? Where tradition, and all that. And this was going to be so awesome, right? And then because I graduated early, there was no awesome to be had. There was no graduation. They didn't do graduations in December. So I'd have to wait till April. And I studied for the bar. I took the bar. I was practicing law by the time graduation took place. And I'd already moved to Florida. And I was going to go back, get my diploma. And I asked anybody else if they wanted to come back with me. And not one member of my family wanted to go to my graduation. And, it'd be asking a lot to have people come to your graduation. But I'd already moved to Florida, so they weren't going to do it. And I took that. It was so devastating to me because I really thought this was going to be so cool. This is my shining moment. But people aren't going to drive, 2,000 miles across the country to go watch me graduate when I was already working, when I already taken the bar. I was already past all that. But it was just, to me, I built it up in my mind, and then it never happened. And it really kind of messed with my thinking. I wanted to have that party. I wanted to have that thing. In fact, I didn't have a party, but my sister, that same year, graduated from community college, and she had her AA. So there was a big party for her, and she decided to sort of make it a party for us. So we went to her graduation. We went to hers. All right. And her 2-year degree. And but we didn't go to my 7-year degree. And then there was a party. Now, the reality is there was a party because she threw a party for herself. My sister was smart enough to know that in life, you got to throw your own parties. You got to do your own thing. Find your happiness, make your happiness, build a memory is what she would say. And it's like, yeah, that's right. You got to take time, stop, smell the roses, enjoy, celebrate, do all that stuff. And I didn't see that. I didn't have that. I was expecting somebody else to throw me a party. So my sister sort of made me part of her party. But it was like, all the people at the party were there to see her. And the big cake there, add my name in there on the side, whatever. it was the most miserable experience because it's like I was always like in her shadow. She's 6 years older than me. And she got on the FaceTime with my parents when the whole family was together. And then I'm like the afterthought. And so I've lived a good chunk of my life in the shadow of my older sibling. And I thought, well, look at this, man. I have a graduate degree. I have a law degree. I have a doctorate in something, And then nobody went to my graduation, and nobody threw me a party. That's how I looked at it. And so it threw me off. It threw my rhythm off. And the reality, of course, that was a tragedy of my own making because nobody was going to drive across the country to go see me if I had to drive across the country too, And that's just not how it worked. If I stayed in Utah, then they probably would have come out to my graduation. If they would have felt obligated. It's quite a sacrifice to do it, but they would have done it. They did it for my bachelor's degree, So I did get that party of that, but and that I think that motivated my sister to go get her 2-year degree. But in those 2 years, she got her degree, and then she had her party, and I got my law degree in roughly the same amount of time. I didn't get a party, so you can still feel the bitterness, right? So I didn't get what I wanted out of life, and it kind of threw me off. The reality is, and I like to tell people, is we're just camping. And I know that because I saw my house. I actually had a ceiling collapse in my house, and we had to go through that. We had to go live in a motel while they actually fix the ceiling. I also had mold in my house that just got into everything, and then this is Florida. There's such a thing as sick building disease, and you don't want that. And you want a respiratory condition from what they call black mold. Well, that sounds weird, but mold, is white mold good? Is it a dessert topping? But whatever. The thing is, I've been through these experiences. You basically, for 3 months, we got chucked out of our house, and we had to bounce around to different locations because we couldn't come back to our house. It was being constructed, and it's a reminder that we're all just camping, and every building you see, every house, from the tiny houses to the McMansions, it's all the same thing. We're still living in caves. These are just man-made caves. It's just somebody built a shelter, someplace where they could store their shit and lock it up, and then live inside in some kind of climate-controlled conditions. That's all it is. All this talk, all this concern. Jesus was right about that whole thing about being worried about everything, the cares of the day. Nobody reads that part of Jesus, by the way. Nobody reads any of the good stuff that Jesus said. It's all the, I am the Son of God. Ooh, I was born of a virgin. Yeah, right. The thing is, you got to approach life like that. The yard is full of dog shit, and that's life. You just gotta play through it, and it's dirty and it's messy and it's disgusting and it's crazy. It's life. And once you start to figure that out, you'll be happy. And you'll probably be a Buddhist. Because I think that's the whole point of Buddhism. The Four Noble Truths starts with, your life is shit. So, something like that. Anyway, I had fun talking to you. I hope you enjoyed listening to me rant and ramble. And I am not going to censor this. And if you don't like it, fuck you. That's the way I talk. Sometimes, anyway. This is Bill Kilpatrick, carpooling with myself.